And so, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and patience. We will make sure this plenary session is straight to the point and as short as possible. The focus of this session will be on responsible, responsive, and resilient leadership. I'd like to welcome here our moderator, the Nigeria Country Director, Development Alternatives Incorporated, Dr. Joe Abba. These are our panelists. Senator Ibrahim Hassan Hadijia, Senator, Jigawa Northeast Senatorial District. Distinguished Senator, we welcome you. Mrs. Juliet Ehimwan, Director, Google, West Africa. Mr. Bayomi Awobokun, co-founder, Orbit 54. Mr. Carl Toriola, CEO, MTN Nigeria. And finally, Mr. Olumide Akpata, partner, Templars. Okay, let's have the video now.
Important for us to pull together stakeholders from these respective agencies.
Okay.
And have the bigger picture, more robust on.
The inexcusable state of education and health systems evident in Nigeria's statistics on out-of-school children, high level of illiteracy, internally displaced persons, maternal mortality, malnourished children, and poverty rate is reflective of the relevance placed on Nigeria's greatest asset, its human capital. This begs the urgent need to deliberate on the imperatives and opportunities to reverse Nigeria's human development crisis. 3. Responsible, responsive, and resilient leadership. This plenary is interpreted for our virtual audience in Pidgin, Hausa, Igbo, French, and Yoruba. Follow the on-screen instructions to gain access. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome our panelists for this plenary.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for rejoining this plenary. I hope you managed to get something to eat. I'm not sure if it was lunch or dinner, but welcome. This panel is talking about responsible, responsive, and resilient leadership. And as is always the case, it's always good to start with definitions. So what, to my mind, is leadership? Leadership is that ability to motivate the willingness of a group of people to achieve a common goal. That's what I would define as leadership. And leadership is something that many have said that Nigeria is notorious for lacking. If you read Chinua Achebe's The Trouble with Nigeria, he says that the trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. It goes further to say that it's the inability or unwillingness of Nigeria's leaders to rise to the challenge of personal example that are the true hallmarks of leadership. So what do we mean when we talk about responsible leadership? Again, to my mind, we're talking about the kind of leadership that puts the interests of the population as a whole first, and that doesn't serve any other interest except the good of the people. By responsive leadership, I mean a leadership that listens and responds to the needs of the people, not one that presumes to know what the citizenry needs without asking. And resilient leadership to me means leadership that continues to be focused on the objectives and doesn't get knocked off course by politics, by primordial interests, ethnicity, religion, any of those things that tend to derail proper leadership in our country. So that's what we're going to be discussing. And the organizers have reminded us that Nigeria is at the threshold of choosing new leadership in 2023. So of course, if you introduce any discussions about leadership alongside any statements to do with 2023, people's minds immediately go to one thing. Who are we going to get in 2023? And while that is important, it's equally important that we distinguish leadership at various levels. Of course, who becomes the president of Nigeria in 2023 is vitally important because the political system we run places so much power in the presidency. But there are also other aspects of leadership. We also have governors who lead 36 states. We have the National Assembly who provide leadership. We have agencies and parastatals who deliver services directly to citizens. We have, or should have, a local government system that also means that people are leading development work at local level. Of course, we also have the private sector, which plays a pivotal role in the development of any nation. I'm very honored to have with me on the panel virtually the full range of people who are able to contribute to this topic. I have the particular honor of having Senator Hadeja, who was also the deputy governor of Jigawa State. So he has both the executive and the legislative experience of leadership to share with us, as well as many people in the private sector who can, share some of their experiences of leading in the private sector so that we can see what we can learn from that. But I think we need to get this 2023 thing out of the way straight away. And so the first thing I'm going to ask each panelist is a very straightforward question. I didn't say it was an easy question. I said it's a straightforward question. And the question is, if you were to be president of Nigeria in 2023, what top 3 priorities would you tackle in your first 100 days and why? Unfortunately for Carl, I'm right-handed, so I tend to start at my extreme right.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus. I was hoping to copy and paste some of the responses. But I think we've heard so much today around what we need in 2023 going forward. And my ideas are not that far away from those key ideas which we heard this morning. I think probably the first is the ease of doing business. I would say that as a private sector member, because job creation really comes out of the private sector. So the ease of doing business, and within that statement comes a whole host of items. Foreign exchange rate clarity and policy is one of those, allowing capital to flow freely in and out of the country. Multiple taxation, and there's a host of other things. So that's one of those. The security of the nation is the primary responsibility of government. And without a secure operating environment in which we can operate in the private or public sector, we will not be able to achieve the kind of growth which we all aspire to. And then third is really harnessing the human capital potential of Nigerians, which we all know is exceptional, but they are not given the breadth to operate in the manner that they potentially can. And that means much more than just setting up educational institutions with the traditional types of education, but really setting up developmental and educational institutions that address the opportunities of the future. So those are three areas which I think will make a lot of difference. But there are many, many other things. I mean, there's talk about oil production, et cetera, et cetera. But from the private sector perspective, I think you would hear mostly unanimity in terms of that. Finally, the consistency of policy. Stability, consistency, and clarity is what the private sector wants above all. And then they can manage within that context. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carl. So this sounds to me like long-term things, focusing on human capital development and focusing on ease of doing business. Are there immediate things you do in the first 100 days?
I mean, the debate is around leadership, right? And I'm not sure there's tremendously much you can do to change the trajectory in the first 100 days, other than instill confidence that you have the right people and the right leadership team to make those changes. So I would expect whoever is successful in being elected as the president of this great country should have as their primary objective assembling a cabinet with a combination of very skilled technocrats. And of course, there will also be an element of politicians that understand how policy affects the direction of a country and can develop the right policies to drive us in the right direction. By the makeup of the cabinet alone, you will immediately install confidence in this market.
Yep.
If you want one thing to do in the first 100 days, it will be it. If you wanted another 3 things to do in the first 100 days, we will say the usual, which we've heard. Fix oil production so that we can get dollars flowing in and out. Fix the multiple exchange rate so that foreign direct investors can come into the business, into the country, and there's free flow of capital, and have clarity and commit to clarity in terms of your policy and consistency in terms of your policy going forward.
Excellent, thank you. Senator Adeja, same question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abba. Carl, answering his bonus question has taken away one of my 3 priorities, but I think there's still room to come up with another 3. I think not because I was present during the last presentation. The very first thing I would do as president is essentially remove the PMS subsidy that we have. It's a no-brainer. It's probably the lowest hanging fruit. And, when you look at the numbers, the budget for subsidy in 2023 is about 3.6 trillion, which is projected to be just for the first 6 months. And that in itself tells you that, the decision to maintain subsidies is more political than economic. But we need to wean ourselves off cheap petrol. That's just the honest truth. We're in a situation today where, the higher the oil price goes up, the higher the subsidy figure, which doesn't make economic sense to me. Every neighboring country surrounding us has PMS that is at least 300% higher in price than Nigeria. So it's not a revelation to understand that just like you said, the figures are probably overinflated. Fuel finds its way to our neighboring countries. All you have to do is look at their own importation figures, and you realize, I understand, and this is coming from an official of the NNPC, that Nigerian PMS finds its way all the way to Sudan. So you have an arbitrage opportunity that allows you to load a tanker of fuel, pay your way through 6-7 borders, and still make money. So that certainly has to go. Second thing I'll do is probably set up a task force to implement the e-governance policy of the government. It's in the cards, but it's been very, very slow in taking off. And I think if we focus on e-governance, it will solve a lot of the transparency issues that the country is also grappled with. Nigeria is a signatory to the Open Governance Partnership. By 2023, 80% of government business should be online. We're very, very far away from achieving that. So I think instead of trying to lift everybody along, that's what we are doing now. The head of service is trying to implement everyone. Let's identify critical areas, critical MDAs, and digitize them. And then we can show the results to the rest of the country and say, this is where we're going. When you do that, we have the infrastructure, we have 5G rolled out, we have, so once you do that, from the data collected, it can impact on other service areas, tax administration, widen the tax base, reports at our courts, for example. Just identify 10 key agencies that should benefit and ensure that they embrace e-governance within a period of 6 to 9 months. The third thing I'll do, I think as the president, is to sign into law the federal audit bill. And this is a piece of legislation that's been lying fallow in the presidency for almost 2 years now. It's been around since 2016. And all it seeks to do is strengthen the Office of Auditor General, give him financial independence, give him the capacity to punish erring MDAs who refuse to submit even their financial statements. And then give him some, create an audit commission for him to select the best staff so that he can do what he does properly. We focus too much, when you talk about anti-corruption in Nigeria, it's all about the glamour of EFCC, the high-profile arrests, which I think is essentially locking the stable door after the horse has bolted. The Auditor General's office gets a budget of 5 billion, out of which only 63 million is for capital. This is to superintend and ensure transparency and accountability for 20 trillion naira. It is simply ridiculous. The EFCC gets 43 billion. Maybe the IPC gets something similar. So for the likes of me, I don't understand why we talk about anti-corruption and not try to focus on prevention, which is essentially what you do.
I agree with that entirely. I don't think you can have a serious anti-corruption regime without having a strong supreme audit institution, which has been lacking for some time. But I wanted to take you back to the issue of removing fuel subsidy that you talked about, because I stumbled across a magazine. I don't know if it was This Day or Tell, going back to 1984 or 85, and it was talking about the need to remove fuel subsidy. There was talk about removing fuel subsidy in 2012, I believe, and people took to the streets. The new government promised it was going to remove fuel subsidy. Are you going to survive if you remove fuel subsidy in your first 100 days?
Yes, why not?
As the next president?
Why not? Kenya just elected a new president. The first thing he did after swearing in was remove their PMS subsidy. You're coming in and when we look at, we deregulated diesel and kerosene years ago. And that really has more of a direct impact on everything that we are being scared about, inflation, cost of goods, and so on and so forth. Yeah. The only thing to me sustaining PMS subsidy really is those that benefit from the arbitraging system, no more, no less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Himwa. Same question. What would you do?
Thank you. So in the first 100 days, it's really about building the foundation for the key priorities to be addressed. And those three priorities for me would be: one, security; two, creating an enabling policy environment for GDP growth; and the third would be tackling corruption. So if I take each of these just very briefly, the issue of security, I feel this is, to a large extent, a leading concern that needs to be addressed because it's stifling growth. Not just growth in the local economy, but also foreign direct investment. If we take some specific examples, if we take the agricultural sector, we know that about 70% of production in this sector is from small-scale farmers. When you have a situation where farmers are unable to go to the farms because they're afraid of being attacked or being held hostage, you have, challenges like, challenges with food supplies and food scarcity, which are contributing factors to some of the inflationary pressures we have today. Also, other industries like tourism, which represents a huge untapped industry in Nigeria with a lot of opportunity. An industry like that cannot even get off the ground if you don't have security. And from the perspective of foreign direct investment, I'm in the tech space, and we've seen a lot of investments that, for all intents and purposes, were aimed for Nigeria, giving us our size and opportunity, being diverted to other countries. And the top two reasons cited in most cases is safety and security. And so this is really something that is getting in the way of growth and progress. The second, creating an enabling policy environment. So it's interesting to note that in spite of all the challenges that we have, Nigeria still represents the largest economy in Africa. We've heard from previous conversations today, the fact that we've had 5 unicorns in the last decade. When you think about the size and opportunity in Nigeria, 5 is a small number. And if I look at fintech specifically, because that's one of the areas where we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of foreign investment. At the moment, we have 250 fintechs in Nigeria. Whilst that may seem like a large number, if you put that in context, that's equivalent to one fintech to 740,000 Nigerians. If we compare to India, it's one fintech to 200,000. If we compare to the US, it's one fintech to 38,000. Europe, 1 to 27,000. So what I'm just trying to say is that there is a huge scope for growth. And so the priority would be to look at the policy map and see what are the obstacles to growth. Because if we remove the obstacles, the private sector would do what it does best, right? And we would see a lot of growth and investments in different sectors in infrastructure. So just really looking at enabling policies to drive SME growth, to encourage private sector investment in different sectors, and also to encourage foreign direct investment. And then the third is corruption. Corruption is a cancer. We all know, and there have been efforts to tackle this. It's something that just really needs to be tackled head on. And just very quickly, I would look to address this from 2 perspectives. The first would be to signal a very strong political will and signal from the top that this is that's zero tolerance for corruption, because we do have institutions that are set up to address these issues. And in some cases, the institutions also take their cue from the signal from governments. They can go as far as the government is, there's a perception of how far the government is willing to go. And so that signal from the top is very important. The second would be just building a tech-enabled government. So leveraging technology to remove as much as possible leakages, to drive transparency, accountability, reduce the cost of governance as much as possible, and to just make sure that government transactions, we are electronic as much as possible so that we reduce the window for human error.
That's interesting. Thanks very much. And you talked about signaling strong political will, and I was about to say, well, the current president actually signaled very strong political will when he first came. Indeed, it was said that his body language alone was sufficient to stop people from being corrupt. But that doesn't last forever. And so it's interesting you were talking about using technology to constrain corruption, which buttresses what Senator Adeja has said about the need for e-governance. Let me go on to Olumide Akpata, and I should have warned you that I was going to embarrass you publicly by saying congratulations on your wedding, and to say that I can already see it on your body. Yeah. So yeah, same question to you. What would you do in the first 100 days?
Thank you, Dr. Abba. Thank you for having me. I won't go after corruption. In Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned, the issue is not that officials are corrupt, but corruption is official. And so if you pursue corruption, you're wasting your time. There are certain things, certain building blocks that need to be put in place. Then you can go after corruption, because it's in our DNA. His Excellency Kayode Fayemi just told us at a session just now that as the governor, his salary is 500,000 naira per month. If that is not an endorsement, or if that is not encouragement to be corrupt, I don't know what else. What if a governor is earning 500,000? A law professor told me she earns 400,000 naira a month, senior law professor. It's the delusion that I find that really bothers me when we do certain things and we expect things to be different. A law professor at the peak of her career, 400,000 naira, 200,000 of which is spending on diesel. So, I mean, there's going to be corruption. So we're going to, let's call it by whatever name. What will I tackle? How's follow-up answer? Firstly, assemble the right people. It's important. I'm hoping that our candidates who are running around the place right now have put their teams together. We need to assemble the right people to deal with the issues that will confront us. Within the context of 100 days, Joe, I would firstly deal with power. I would deal with power or energy head-on, because we need to fire up the economy. And power, at least I have some experience with power, having advised in that sector. There are short, medium, and long-term solutions to power. I think it's a huge joke that we're still dancing around. In fact, I hear it's no longer 5,000 megawatts. We're still dancing around under 5,000 megawatts for this economy. So any government who comes into office, 100 days, you can begin to deal with short-term issues regarding power. Now, we have no business spending our money on anything else. Whatever monies we have, put it to firing up the economy. We have a resilient population. We have people who are ready to go out there and get things done. They are just hampered by government's inability to provide that enabling environment. So there must be, if I were president and I can't deal with power, shoot me. I don't understand. I don't understand how we are still talking about power. As a lawyer, I got into the power space in 1999 or thereabouts when we're doing the privatization. And to think that we're worse off even now, it is befuddling. So power is the first thing. Energy, we need to ensure that small businesses are able to survive because the bulk of our population are in that space, the SMEs and all of that. The next thing I would deal with, as Mr. Himo had mentioned, is security. Security and life and property, Carl also mentioned, is the business of government. So we must deal with the issue of security. And in dealing with security, we cannot encourage mediocrity or non-performance. There must be accountability. those who are charged with handling our security must be held to account. They must, and I've dealt with them. I'm a lawyer, I've been a lawyer for 30 years. When they want to work, they work. When our security agencies want to perform, they perform. So whatever it is that's making them perform, we have to find it. And if they don't perform, we need to get rid of them. I mean, forgive me, jailbreak in the heart of Abuja, 3,000 prisoners let loose on the Abuja population, and somebody is still at his desk sitting and is called controller something or minister. Oh, there must be sanctions. We must let people know that either you do the job or you ship up or ship out. It just doesn't work. You go to Rwanda, it won't happen. Not on Kagame's watch. If you are not doing your job, you will be kicked out. And it is when that tone from the top comes down and percolates, then people will understand that you must perform. So when you tell me everybody's wringing their hands in despair and can't deal with security, how can you not deal with security? Then you have no business being there. That's the third one. Then the second one. The third one, Joe, is we need to fire up the economy. So access to finance is critical. And those are things that can be dealt with, right? The big banks can't be lending only to Aliko Dangote, right? You walk into some of these banks, you can see just by the setup that if you are an SME, they are not interested. They are not set up for small business, right? So for me, access to finance is critical. How do we reorganize that space to ensure that there is credit? No economy, none of these businesses will function if they cannot access credit. The average Nigerian businessman cannot get credit. The farmer cannot get credit. How do we need to jumpstart this? And yeah, we're still talking 100 days, I know. And within 100 days, at least at the level of just ensuring that we have policy in place to ensure that these guys can walk into the banks and access credit and get credit. What kind of structures can we put in place? Is it insurance? What do we do to ensure that our small business, the bulk of our people are there? And that is where, and once you can fire up the economy, once you can get people active, engaged, and there's a reasonable expectation that they will be able to conduct their business in a safe environment, you'll see that the country will begin to, things will pick up, country will begin to, there will be a buzz. And then you can now turn around and say, hey, let's deal with some other medium to long-term issues. But within 100 days, and then, of course, once you do that, what you have also done is set the tone from the top, and everybody would fall into place.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Olu. Let me just say that when we talk about public servants on low pay, we need to distinguish between people. You see, if I was a governor, I'll probably never be. I will not take a salary. So I won't complain about 500,000 if I'm getting a security vote that I don't have to account for. It's not subject to audit. I live in a free house. I eat free food. I don't pay bills. So let's please distinguish. Yes, professors, we should pay professors more. We should pay them more, but also make it difficult for them to go on strike because they want to dictate to their employer which payment system to pay them with. So we need to distinguish between this. It's beside the point. I just couldn't resist.
No, and me too, I can't resist, Joe. Joe, we need to wake up. Forget about governor.
That's what I said. Forget about governors.
No, forget about governor. Joe, I just left office as president of the bar, as you know. Do you know what our judges are paid? Do you know what our judges are paid? High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court. Do you know what the judges? It's a joke. And you want the judge in those that I'm told in Western Nigeria, in the West, the chief judge of the West earned more than the central bank governor at that time. Now you pay the judge pittance, and then you play the ostrich and say, oh, what is happening to our judiciary? I am not in any way endorsing bad behavior, but I'm telling you, if you don't begin to fix certain things, right, you are going to get results that are very, very unsavory. That's what's going to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Oboku, same question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. First of all, it's my first time in NESG, so I have to commend those who have been doing this for 28 years. You certainly have a special place in heaven. If we hire a competent CEO for the country, in 100 days, this fellow must be able to show he's competent at addressing the security situation. And if he's unable to show that he's competent, he must go. It doesn't matter how he goes. It could go in 4 years or somebody can do what they need to do. We just have to get serious. We need to share data and show empathy for the lives lost in this country. What is wrong with us? People are dying every day, right? Let's not even talk about cars stolen or bad fuel bought and no accountability. Let's talk about life and property first. Thousands of people die every day. Lagos, Ibadan. We read it in the news like rain fell. Now there's an acronym, unknown gunmen, UGM. For me, I'm not going to belabor the point. Security must be the first. The fellow must show data-driven progress in 100 days. There's a record of deaths and births in this country. We are not monkeys. Number one. Number two, you must show that you can tackle the various subsidies. I'm an oil and gas professional. Fuel subsidy is not the only subsidy here where people are enriching themselves. Today, people, the difference, if you get $100,000 today at the CBN exchange rate, you just made 30 million naira. How are we pretending as if fuel subsidy is our only problem? There are numerous subsidies. We've got to tackle all these interesting leakages that allow politicians keep their friends in office and make money so that they can contest elections again at our expense. And importantly, perhaps you can then focus on the third thing. I'm going to keep my answer very brief. Human capital. Whether it's judges you want to pay better, or policemen, or teachers in schools. Today, if you stop fuel subsidy, you release 5 trillion into that basket. Surely, if you know what you're doing, you can weaponize the whole economy with 5 million of additional salary instead of paying subsidies. Pick a team that we can read their CVs on LinkedIn, for God's sake. Not just for your ministers, for every single parastatal, every single agency. If the fellow wants to be chief of army staff, let him show us what he has done. How is it because he was former deputy chief of army staff and so he's the next chief of army staff? What are we doing? And then show us the KPIs you've given them online by their parastatal website so we can hold them accountable. In addition to that, sack them if they don't deliver in 100 days, if you want us to keep you in office. And most importantly, promote cohesion. Tell us consistently what you expect them to deliver. Again, I have to thank the people who organize this thing where ministers come and say that they are working hard and there's no results on the streets. I really commend you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. We've actually had our time cut short. We're supposed to have 90 minutes and we're only allocated 60. So we're going to have to cut short the time you have for your answers. But I'll try and ask one more round of questions each. And I'll start with Senator Hadeja. So we've talked about the kind of leadership we need, the kind we want, the sorts of things we would want that leadership, at least at the presidential level, to do in the first 100 days. However, you've had experience of being both in the executive and the legislative arms. And through these, you know how leaders emerge in our system. Given the delegate system that we have in political parties and the Electoral Act of 2022, can our current electoral system actually produce the kind of leadership that will take some of these steps that have been described by the panel here today? 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, I think the controversy generated by the recent primary elections what brought out to light the issue of delegates and the new Electoral Act. And we keep on having about the fact that our delegates are controlled by the governors or they are selected by governors. I think, first of all, we need to understand that we've come a long way from 1999. When you look at the general elections themselves, we have credible elections in this country and they can only get better, you know, with INEC being given powers to go into full electronic voting. Every subsequent election is better than the last. So if you have an electoral process that works, I think that is really the first step in now ensuring internal democracy within the party, because very simple. From 99 to now, there has never been an election where the governors have not held sway. Let's be very honest. I mean, they control the political structures, they have the resources. So it's not simply a question of delegates. The new Electoral Act was hurriedly passed through. And then from it being signed into law to actual emergence of delegates, we barely had a week to ensure that delegates emerge democratically. So you find that because there was no time, people just rushed through and came out. There was nothing anybody could do. But delegates are also meant to be elected. So now that we have seen what happened, we have seen how important it is to ensure that you have a delegate that will go and select a person for you that should be fit for president or governor, then we need to start taking the delegate issue very seriously. Delegates are supposed to buy forms from the parties. They're supposed to go and campaign at their various wards and then be elected. So at that micro level, it's not impossible, but it's not foreseeable that a governor would going to have control over what happens at the micro level. Your chief imam, your pastor, your resident, whatever, people can go and say, listen, you come out and be our delegate, and we'll support you because you are going to be elected. If that happens, I think that we need to wait till the next round to see what happens with that process. Having said that, if we have a good electoral process, if the elections are now counting, they are credible. And of course, it now behoves on us to say, any governor that goes and selects somebody that we don't want, we punish him at the polls. It's not easy in Nigeria because of the fact that you have 2 or 3 main parties and every other party is also in somebody's pocket. We've tried to advocate for independent candidature in the constitution. If that happens, that is very, very simple. We've seen it happen at the midterm elections. The Republicans were expecting a whitewash. They didn't get what they want. And now they're blaming a particular individual for forcing only his people to be voted. We can do the same thing. You know, it will take time. But like I said, let's bear in mind that we have a very, very good election process now in Nigeria, and it's getting better. And let us use our power, you know, at the polling booths to ensure that, you know, if somebody decides that this is who we want, or this is who we believe can do the right job, and you say, no, I want my brother or my son or whatever, then, you know, we take it out of the polls and people exercise their right to vote.
Thank you so much, Senator. And it's also worth reminding ourselves that next year would actually make it 24 unbroken years of continuous democracy in Nigeria, something we've never had since our history. So let me use the opportunity to encourage everyone to please come out and vote in the next elections. I want to go to Olumide Akpata next, because you've also recently concluded your tenure as the president of the Nigerian Bar Association. And at the time that you were running for office, many people said, well, Olumide is not a politician. However, you know, you get this mutual sense of disrespect, where technocrats, quote and unquote, view politicians as people that just do dirty things and they don't want to be associated with them. On the other hand, the politicians view the technocrats as people who don't want to get their hands dirty, but want to eat the food when it is ready. So given your recent experience as someone who was seen as not a politician, but a technocrat who has had to go into a highly political association, the leadership of a highly political association, how do we balance the two? How do we get more technocrats to be more politically minded? And how do we get more politicians to be more technocratic in their thinking?
Thank you, Joe. I'm not so sure my colleagues will agree that the MBA is a highly political.
I think it is.
So they're going to say I would no comment on that. I think that's your comment, and you're a member of the bar too. So, but however, I get your point, Joe. I totally get it, and I'm not so sure. I'm not big on labels. So technocrats, politician. I mean, I guess I'm supposed to be a technocrat. I don't wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say I'm a technocrat. I think, honestly, that like Yomi said just now, the whole idea or the whole point is that whoever is at the top, the leader, must assemble the right people and put square pegs in square holes. Ensure that we see track. Let us know what this person has done to qualify him or her for whatever position. Because when we talk of technocrat or politician, I mean, there are examples abound of abysmal performance on both sides, whether it is technocrat or politician. So I'm not so sure that therein lies the problem. I think it's just so much about us, who we are as a people. What do we believe in? I believe it was you, Joe, in quoting from Chinua Achebe, where he said that there's that inability to put the interests of the nation ahead of any other interest. And that is what I find as it is repeated everywhere you turn. Nobody is interested in the interest of the nation, what is good for the nation. And so whether technocrat or politician, what is important is, number one, the interest of the nation. Number two, putting your self-interest aside, which is the same thing. Number three, we must rise to meet standards. We can't pull standards to meet us where we are. We must understand that global best practice applies to us also. We must ensure that we make Nigeria a shining example. It cannot be that, like Chimamanda Adichie said when she came to the MBA conference this year, it cannot be that every time we go elsewhere, we feel a sense of patriotic shame. Each time we go, she coined that phrase, and I couldn't agree more. So we need to ensure that the people that we have in positions are worthy of those positions, and that when they get there, we hold them to account. If they don't perform, we get rid of them. As Yomi said, either you get rid of them through the ballot box or you get rid of them anyhow, any way possible. So forgive me for not delving into this dichotomy of technocrat or politician. What I find is that our value system is warped. We don't have that sense of excellence. It's more excuses than performance, and it is across board. That's what we find, and that we must get rid of. We must find people who can get the job done. Don't come up with excuses, just get the job done. If you are unable to do it, don't stand in the way. The problem with leadership in Nigeria is that there are too many barriers. We are unable to get the right people to actually get to those positions. And we must resolve amongst ourselves that even if it is not me or you going into those positions, we must enable a process that would allow for the right man to get there, whether you call him technocrat or woman, or call him or her politician. But if you keep churning out the same set of people who are not really interested in the nation, called Nigeria, we will have the same results, no matter what you call the person, whatever position, whatever characterization you put to that individual. So that's my view.
And it's a very good point. And it's the point I was actually trying to explore with Senator Adeja in terms of how leaders emerge through our political system. And it will be really interesting to compare and contrast that with how leaders emerge in the private sector to see whether there are lessons that can be learned. But let me start with Juliet, who is the country director of a global company for Nigeria and West Africa. How can we get transformational leadership that reflects national priorities within such a globalized world as the one that Google operates in?
Thank you. So globalization has been a reality for a while, and it's one that is here to stay. And when you talk about globalization, there are two things. One is the fact that it just really opens new markets, so that we're all of a sudden not talking about a 200 million person market, which is what we have which is the population of Nigeria, but we're potentially talking about an 8 billion person market, which is the global population. And leadership that is transformational in an era of globalization like what we have today would need to be able to recognize the comparative advantage that exists in the market and create enabling policies to be able to maximize and take advantage of the broader opportunities that globalization makes possible, access to open markets. But on the flip side as well, our markets are also accessible to other players as well. And so there are things to guard against to make sure that any risks of some of the gaming that you have in open markets, that the country doesn't become a dumping ground, that you don't have anti-competitive practices that stifle the local industry, etc., that there are policies to guard against those things. But if I double click on the comparative advantage side of things and the benefits, if we look at Nigeria today, what are some of those? Very practically, number one is the fact that we have a very young, vibrant, tech-savvy population. And we have everything that it takes really to potentially become a global technology powerhouse. And an industry like the outsourcing industry, for example, is one that is a low-hanging fruit potentially for Nigeria in terms of job creation, in terms of putting all of those amazing skills to productive use, in terms of generating income. But this requires a transformational leader that would create that vision and sets the framework for that to be possible. Another comparative advantage is just our cultural heritage, arts, culture, our music. More and more, we're seeing Nigerian creative content consumed globally. And we're seeing the use of digital platforms to broadcast such creative content. For example, very specifically, a digital platform like YouTube, we're seeing 60% growth in the number of channels on YouTube that are earning 7-figure incomes. And so that represents a great opportunity to diversify the economy, which we talk about, because those channels are monetized. So you're attracting revenue from outside in. And then, the third example I'll give is, a leadership that recognizes the trends and the opportunities in the global space and is able to create a space for those opportunities to be tapped into. So for example, there's a lot of evidence to the fact that some of our challenges, or as a country or even as a continent, would not be solved by traditional methods of the past. We need innovative thinking. We have emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning that are already being applied to solve problems at scale. If I take a basic sector like agriculture, you'll be interested to know that there are, in parts of Africa where machine learning is being used by subsistence farmers to be able to automatically detect diseases with cassava crops in cassava farms. The app is just on a basic phone, which is pointed to the crop, and then it brings out what the issue is and what the solution should be.
Okay.
So these models are ways to just really ensure that we harness what's available to drive economic growth, and the leadership that sets that vision and is able to steer that course can be transformational.
Thank you so much. Let me go next to Carl. How do we recognize this transformational leader when we see him or her?
So you referred to your definition of leadership, which is very similar to mine. It's the ability to influence people towards a common goal. In the private sector, in the corporate sector, what you generally look for is the ability of an individual to execute. And I'll connect that to possibly one of Olumide's points, the ability to execute on transforming the power sector. In the corporate sector, you look at financial results, ability to deliver financial results, to influence the team, and the ability to manage risk. Things like today, you are riding on $130 oil. What are you planning for the days when you're on $15 oil? And in some ways, what you look for, what one should look for in the public sector isn't that different. The problem is, how does the selection process end up with one set of leaders or the others? I think in good corporates, and as I think Olumide mentioned, there are great corporates in Nigeria, and there are corporates which we can't remember anymore that have fallen apart. But the ones that function well have very strong governance, a separation in many instances of the ownership and the management, or the board and the management. But there are many companies founded by individuals that have done tremendously well. And they're driven by the key objectives that a corporate has, which is growth, dividends, share price appreciation. For the public sector, it's the well-being of your people. It's your GDP per capita, it's security, it's your happiness index, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, security and prosperity. The major difference perhaps in the corporate sector is that the leaders are held accountable on an ongoing basis. Every week you're assessing your financial results. Every month you present it to your board or your group holding company. Every quarter you have to go and announce to the capital markets, to your shareholders, etc. So there's continuous accountability in the private sector of the leadership. And I think that drives the performance of leadership and the ability to change out that leadership, or the decisiveness to change out that leadership when it doesn't work. How do we get that in the private sector? I think there's a philosopher, a Greek philosopher, I can't remember if it's Socrates or one of these things, that said, one of the most dangerous things is one man, one vote. Because unfortunately, not everyone that votes has the full knowledge of facts and the skills to distill between this candidate having all those attributes and that one not having it. So it behoves on a greater breadth of society than the political class to really get involved in the selection of candidates, be it the academia, be it the journalism industry that is extremely active, I must compliment them, be it the judiciary and people, practicing lawyers, the corporate sector, etc. If we don't all start to get involved in how we identify the candidates and supporting the candidates that have those attributes which are described, then we won't get there. I think inevitably Nigeria is going to get there. The problem is we lose a lot of lives, a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of dreams along the way. But there's all of us have to get involved to get us in the right direction. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Abayomi, when we talk leadership in Nigeria, we often almost always focus on political leadership. However, both Juliet and the senator have talked about the importance of e-governance, the importance of using technology to drive development. A lot of our young people are actually, to my mind, demonstrating transformational leadership in the technology space, particularly in the financial technology space. What attributes do they have? What do they do that makes them so successful?
You know, what makes them successful is also what's lacking in political leadership, is lack of imagination. You know, I boarded a flight to Abuja, Air Peace, apart from the fact that it was not on time, there's data. 180 people were on the flight, there's data. You have to understand that we all walked into the Nnamdi Azikiwe terminals through the exit.
Why?
That was the door that was open. The exit door, the door for the exit for luggage is how you enter the airports. It's absolutely no imagination. And also that is why, on the other hand, people say young people should be given roles because they're more imaginative. The imagination is the answer. And that imagination is easy to drive with data. See, people leave the country every day, not because of any other reason, but because they don't even make it to the data level after they're dead. You know how many people died yesterday in the country? That's why they left. Leaders have no imagination. And I can continue. Then the areas where we've displayed imagination as well, we've seen progress. There's a PVC today because we imagined that until we have this and that, it's going to get more difficult for us to do this and that. There is a BVN system today. Somebody imagined, or a group of people imagined and used technology to start to make progress. There's a NIN system today. There's a telecom sector today. We are exchanging videos today. Imagination is the answer. When they say that leaders should use young people or use women, you know, a lot of times we don't understand that it's a natural progression for a community or society to diversify in the selection of your leaders and office holders. It's because after a while, if you have a role, your imagination right? And you hear imagination all day. At least you stand up and say, let's do this. People think you're smart. And then we won't be meeting for 28 years talking about why or not there's a subsidy. And the people saying so are the people that are supposed to have stopped it. Yeah. Certainly no imagination. And let's talk about the job. This is a board meeting. This is a board meeting, like Carl said. This is the kind of meeting where we say, so you guys didn't deliver what you promised. I can't imagine. Leaders, no imagination. They say everything but the name of the incompetent person in the room. There's only 4 or 5 of them. It's not 20 or 100. So Dr. Joe, I have to tell you, even if I'm never invited back, we can't continue this way with lack of 5 women on the board, 6 women on the board. You don't understand that that's where the imagination is. You should be full with people with imagination. For young people should fight for it. They don't have to fight for it. The more young people in my team, I was the oldest guy in our company. I was 42. Guess what? I go around, people say, Yomi, you've done very well in NU. Of course I did. I hired young people. All the imagination came from them.
Okay.
So Doc, with all due respect, you can only get that quality of leadership that you see that creates unicorns in the public sector. I'm not saying don't hire old people. I'm not saying old people shouldn't win elections because we don't have the cash to win. But after they win, if they want to stay in office and deliver the goods, they should hire more women and young people for the imagination they need.
Absolutely. And I agree totally. I think having supported the not too young to run movement, I look forward to supporting the not too poor to run movement as well. But I'm going to give each panelist just 1 minute for their final thoughts. We've run out of time already. Let me again start from should I start from my right or my left this time? Let me go to my left this time and say, you have 1 minute to give me your closing thoughts.
Doc, thank you. My 1 minute will be spent on just reaching out to everybody. There's only so much we can achieve with a structure because the thing is rigged against common sense, is rigged against progress, is rigged against, frankly, its citizens. And we've heard it even from the actors. We may not be able to remove some of them for 4 years on call, but at least if there's one thing we do, which I hope we do well, is let's call the names of the people that should be fired. let's not abuse them. Let's just say this man is in charge of this institution and is incompetent. He's done a bad job. And let's have the data to support it. Let data drive the communication, the exchanges we have, not insults, not tribe, not personal expectations, but data that lifts up society. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can help with compiling that list. I can bet you. Olumide.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. For me, I think we should not forget about some of the softer issues, very important issues. I hope we realize that we really don't have a nation any longer. And when I say that, I mean that from the point of view of our people believing in our country, Nigerians believing in Nigeria. So your problem is not necessarily corruption, insecurity, or whatever. Your problem is that you have a people who don't believe in this space. And if you don't deal with that, you didn't congratulate me. I turned 50 on the 7th of October, right? Now, we were the leaders of tomorrow, right? And I am 50 now. And we were the last set of Nigerians, really, who got a whiff of what our nation was meant to be. And if we don't begin to tell those coming behind of what Nigeria, if we don't begin to paint a picture that they can hope for and aspire towards, you're going to find each of us working in silos, and Nigeria will just be a gold mine where people dig for gold and they japa. So we must understand that that is a major problem. In those days, or where we still have unity colleges and we still have NYSC, but when they were set up to bring about national cohesion, to bring about a people who understand, who think as Nigerians. Now you don't have that. Now you have, in every federal government college, worry, only people in Efuru and Benin go there. Now, because nobody is thinking in terms of, when I was running, Joe, 30 seconds, when I was running for president of the bar, one of the things I found out was that 7 out of 10 lawyers would ask, what does the MBA do for me? So there was a total disconnect. But you are all witnesses to the resurgence at the bar, because one of the things we set about doing was firstly to get the buy-in of the Nigerian lawyer, to say you can believe again in your association. It is worth it, even just by simply communicating with them. I was writing letters to my colleagues, and they will write back and say, this is the first time I've ever heard from my association. We need to get our people to believe again in this country. Otherwise, everything you do, you'll be swimming against the tide, and you will really not achieve much. Don't take it for granted. We must encourage those platforms that engender national unity. Today, it is Nollywood. Today, it is Nigerian music. Today, it is football. It could be, we must look for those platforms that allow for people to believe in this country. Otherwise, we will really be wasting our time. We don't know, Dr. Joe, we have, in the last 40 years, we have torn to shreds the fabric of our nation. That's what I think.
I agree. And, it's very difficult to engage with a young Nigerian that has never experienced a Nigeria that works, or at least seems to work. I say to people that both my parents are public servants, who were able to go to the National Stadium in Lagos then and participate in a lottery in 1977 and won a house in Festac, which my parents were able to pay for 25 years on a mortgage. I still remember the brand new 504 that my dad brought. I'll never forget it. Horrible color, lime green color. But it was brand new, and as an engineer with Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, he was able to buy a brand new car and pay for it gradually. And then, just like Professor Obu was saying this morning, what all of us are, certainly what I am today, is as a result of the quality of education I had in the Nigerian public school system. So yes, we do need to go back to that and show that some things are possible. Julian, 1 minute.
I think there is a strong sense of urgency. I believe that for most or perhaps everyone in this room, where we are today as a nation is a far cry from the vision that we have for the country and what we know is possible. And so if we have the mantle of leadership, it is worth asking ourselves, is the nation sinking or thriving under our watch? Are we failing the 100 billion plus young Nigerians that are so talented and energetic, or are we giving them hope for the future? Are we creating an environment where every single Nigerian has the opportunity to maximize their potential? These questions should be at the conscience of everyone who holds a leadership position. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Senator Adeja.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abba. And I think on a final note, I would just like to say that, every cloud has a silver lining, despite all the issues we have raised. We are at a point in time where there's a lot of information out there. We talk about leadership, we talk about holding leaders to account. I think for all I've said, I will repeat the fact that our electoral process has come a long way. And, we have an opportunity to actually, when Zapata refused to go into the dichotomy between politicians and I find that very, because you find that a part of the problem is the fact that no matter how much you talk about it, no matter how much you complain about it, if you don't participate in the process, then there's no way you can effect it. It's just that simple. It's not beyond having PVC and going to vote. There's a lot of things we can do. Young people could join political parties. I've said it before, essential problem is the fact that the internal democracy within the party structure is flawed. It's not what it should be. But certainly economies of scale, if we have enough young people getting interested in politics and joining the party at that level. I just mentioned the fact that the new law says that even delegates should go and campaign and be voted for. You can start from there. You can be a delegate, and then we'll see when it comes to primary elections whether you will be one of those delegates that will be called aside, or whether you will feel a sense of responsibility for people having voted you to be a delegate to go and maybe support a particular candidate. We need to get involved. We need to get our hands dirty. We've seen shining examples of technocrats. Governor Rufai just left this room about 30 minutes ago. Say what you will about politicians and corruption and whatever. We have pockets of excellence. And I think they should be, they should serve as inspiration to us that it's possible. It's not all about, dirty politicians and incompetent people. That's my final word, really. We need to get involved, especially at the younger level.
Thank you, distinguished senator. And of course, that distinction supposes wrongly, in my view, that you cannot be a politician and be technically excellent, or that you cannot be technically excellent and still be politically minded. So you're absolutely right in that regard. Carl, final word.
Well, I'll start off by harking back to maybe the 70s and the early 80s, when, if you looked at where I grew up, in University of Ife, if you go back to the structures of Awo Hall and Fajri Hall, you will see the rooms in the hostels. They were designed to take 2 people, and every room has a slot for an air conditioner. That's how great Nigeria was. Students got bursaries, and their meal ticket of 25 kobo got them jollof rice, a quarter of a chicken, and ice cream. That was what Nigeria was 30, 40 years ago, more like 40 actually. Wise man who is in some way connected to MTN told me that Nigeria always moves to the brink of disaster, and then the brink of disaster moves away. It's not that Nigeria moves back. The brink of disaster moves away. I had a debate with a gentleman, and we both agreed that we have sent drones to that brink of disaster. That brink of disaster has hit a brick wall. We are at a point in time where this country has to change. And perhaps the thing that smiles most in our favor is that view seems to be universal. There's a burning platform. Everybody recognizes that it's now or never, or we are doomed. And I think that's what I'm optimistic about, that if you speak to anybody, government, politics, private sector, young people, Nigeria has to change now. We probably have 12 months to get ourselves in the right direction. So I'm optimistic, but I think we all need to get behind that. The one thing that worries me is that we've destroyed the value system in this country. You can call it the culture. I can't remember what the right words that he used for it. To rebuild the value system of a nation, it's a 100-year project. And it's something we need to start working on. But I'm optimistic that we all see the desperate need for change now. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm also optimistic. And I did see the hostels that were designed to take 2 people. Indeed, some of us that are a little bit older than Olumide have often been accused of having eaten full chicken when we're in university and drank milk. But unfortunately for me, it finished just before I got there. And nothing can be more painful than, when it finishes just before you got there, because you've been on the queue, you still get accused of having enjoyed it even though you didn't. But, thanks very much to all my panelists. I think the only very brief statement I'll make is to paraphrase what one of my favorite political philosophers, Niccolo Machiavelli, once said. Machiavelli said, if Moses didn't find the Israelites in Egypt suffering slavery at that particular moment in time, there may never have been a Moses than you and I know today. And so transformational leadership can be situational. It's often situational. And it seems to all of us, I think we all agree, that the situation we are in Nigeria today is ripe for a transformational leadership to come in and take us out of Egypt into the promised land. Thank you very much. May I please ask that you appreciate my colleagues? Thank you very much.
For those that are a bit tired, you've been sitting since 9 a.m. and you are feeling, when do we go home? This is a promised land. I thank you, the panel. It's been amazing, wonderful. Mr. Chairman, please join the panel here. While the photograph is going on, let me quickly announce that you need to download the NESG app and begin to interact with it, because this evening we have about 5 dinners that we'll be holding, 4 that we'll be holding in different venues. The first one will be Investment Meets Opportunities, Economic Progress through the Sports Industry, hosted by Sport Nigeria Limited and GTE. That will be in Ogun, Nasarawa Hall. But to be part of it, download the app. The second dinner will be Expanding Frontiers of Impact Capital in Nigeria, hosted by Nigeria National Advisory Board for Impact Investing, and that will be in Imo, Rivers, and Cross River Hall. The third dinner tonight will be Positioning the Capital Market to Leverage Commodities Exchange, hosted by Affex Commodities. And then the fourth one will be Emerging Technologies for Social and Economic Inclusion, Connecting People and Democratizing Access, Borno and Anambra Hall. That's the dinner. Download the app. But for now, it's been wonderful. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's before then, there will be the interactive session for breakfast, and then we'll be here for the plenary 9 a.m. But my colleague, Oladile Gulana, will be interviewing members of the panel. That's him there, close to them. Please give him access. Dr. Abba, that's him. That's my colleague. He'll be interviewing all of you outside for the summit. So until the dinner time, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.